But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Hello, sweetie squad, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio News number 152. If the Parkland shooter was bullied, who bullied him? I am your host, Brian Martinez, and I am here with our grossly offensive panelists to look at the best feels, funnies, and what the fucks to discuss Slam Bam Badger style. Prepare your amygdala, because we're going in dry. Before we even dive in, I'm going to ask that you please smash that like button. It really helps our analytics, and if you haven't subbed, please do so. Also, be sure to turn on your notifications bell so that you are to be sure to be notified when we go live. Now, let's dip our ankles in it. Today's Polecat panel consists of Maximilian, I am not responsible for the yellow snow in Canada, Darrett.
Yes, I am.
Our Polecat punster and Pussycat Punisher, Hannah. Dr. Ranimer Cam, Evil Panda, Puppet Master, and Rabid Long Range Rhetorician. And me,
To be sure.
And me, the Supreme Doge in charge, back in the sack. We have a pretty interesting show for you guys today, so please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat and in the comments section. This week we'll be looking at a Texas woman who made up a story about being gang raped because she was depressed. A French brothel staffed with sex dolls was almost closed because of criticism that it degrades women and promotes rape culture. We also look at a few sources that claim gun control advocate and Parkland shooting victim Emma Gonzalez may have been among the students who bullied and ostracized the gunman Nicholas Cruz. Then we have a few short stories, one of an Argentinian man who changed his gender so that he could retire early, and a skeleton of a Viking of some renown turns out to be female. And finally, our bonus story for the patron-only after show. For after show participants, I have a special little article from the good women at Femalista entitled, I'm a slut and 100% proud of it. So stop shaming me already, because being a slut doesn't mean I'm a bad person, it just means that you're judgmental. Anyway, if you would like to participate in our after shows either as an audience member or a participant, please consider becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. If you don't want to wake up one morning and find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channels, go to badgerfeed.com. So one minor news story before we get into the meat of the program. Just some little news that I thought I would share. In London of ICMI 2016, one of the speakers that spoke there talked about a documentary called American Circumcision, and it is basically all about circumcision, and it is a very, very eye-opening documentary. If you are interested, I've been waiting for this to come out for some time. It has finally started to launch, and they have upcoming screenings. So if you go to circumcisionmovie.com, and I'll put a link in the low bar after the show so you guys can go check it out. But if you go to circumcisionmovie.com, you will see a full listing of all the screenings, and you'll be able to get advance tickets to watch this important documentary. So it's going to be, there's going to be playing in Washington, D.C., New York, Boston, Massachusetts, Chicago, Denver, St. Bonaventure, that's in New York as well, Salt Lake City, St. Louis, Detroit, Rochester, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, Texas, and Austin, Texas. So yeah, be sure. And it's going to be coming soon everywhere, but this is the limited screening right now. They're also going to be doing college tours, so you'll be able to maybe catch it at your local university if you are a university student. So yeah, there it is. American Circumcision. Really, really great looking documentary that I heard about at the ICMI 2016. I think a very important film. So I I guess unless there's any other things anybody wants to mention about this or anything else.
Is it coming to Springfield, USA?
Let's see. If I understand correctly, no, it's not, but maybe the nearest place would be California.
Okay. Don't support this documentary then. They're clearly discriminatory against the Simpsons kin population.
Well, you can actually set up your own screening over there if you wanted to. I
could.
Yeah, you could, but you'd rather just complain.
But I'm very, very lazy.
Okay.
I mean, look how lazy I am. Look at your screen right now. I'm sitting perfectly still in this easy chair.
Yes, exactly. Why would you expend any more energy than is what is absolutely necessary?
All right. Said that we're both suspending our hands in the air like some kind of like Hindu guy. He hits there with his hand in the air praising God. I don't know how we do it. It requires incredible muscles in the right arm.
Yeah, but you guys should see the grin I'm maintaining. I'm not going to explain why.
You're able to speak through your teeth with such enunciation. It's brilliant, Hannah.
Oh, that's just a female talent. It's learned in junior high when we have to deal with each other.
Really? What other talents do you have? Don't answer that question.
Well, now you're getting into why I have that big smile on my face.
Ah, okay. It's a good thing you can't see what's happening under the desk, ladies and gentlemen.
What?
What? I didn't say anything.
What? Oh, okay.
Just as you said that, we got something weird's happening in the feed, Brian.
Yeah, no worries.
It's not the Badger Cave anymore.
Yeah, I'm just trying to fix something that is happening. I'm trying to figure out what that is.
We're getting DDoSed.
There it is. Okay, now I got it. All right. Sorry about that. So, this is the PowerPoint. I just had to set it up real quick. All right. Anyway, let's get into the stories. Just give me a second here. I got the minimize this window. All right, I'm ready. Sorry. So we're going to go ahead and get into the first story. Woman pleads guilty and avoids jail time after lying to police about being gang raped. This should be fun. Brianna Rochelle Harmon received 8 years probation, is ordered to pay $10,000 in restitution and fines, and ordered to serve 160 hours of community service after lying to police that she was gang raped by 3 black men. Last year, on March 8th, Brianna Rochelle Harmon ran into a church pantsless and bloody. She then told the police that 3 black men wearing ski masks had abducted her in a nearby woods and proceeded to gang rape her. Her story fell apart, however, when jeans found near the alleged crime scene did not match her injuries. Also, medical professionals examined Harmon and did not find any evidence to support her sexual assault claim. She eventually confessed 2 weeks later that she cut herself and her clothes after getting into a fight with her ex-fiancé. She didn't want to tell the truth to her mother because her mother would be mad at her, so Harmon instead made up her story. Harmon was first arrested for a misdemeanor offense for filing a false report to a peace officer. However, Grayson County DA Joe Brown decided to instead charge her with 2 third-degree felonies for tampering with physical evidence, a third-degree felony of tampering with government records, and a 4th-degree jail felony of tampering with a government record. With her plea deal, Harmon will be able to avoid being labeled a convicted felon if she abides by her 8 probation, despite the guilty plea. DA Joe Brown said in a press release back when the charges were initially being filed that, quote, Ms. Harmon was originally arrested for the misdemeanor of offense of false report to a peace officer. However, the more we have looked at what happened in this case and considered the harm it caused, and certainly could have caused, we believe that she does fit these higher charges. What she did was a very serious crime, and we believe it was a felony conduct. In a statement to Fox News, Harmon's lawyer said, she's very remorseful for what she did and what she said, and that's why she decided to plead guilty. From the Daily Mail, When given a chance to speak at her sentencing hearing, Harmon said that at the time of the incident, she suffered from depression that was brought on by the loss of her unborn baby and relationship troubles. She also apologized to police and the community for lying. Does anybody want to say anything about that?
Classic case of Munchausen by proxy, right?
Well, how many men would get away with the commission of multiple felonies by telling a judge, I was depressed? And how many men would expect to walk into court and use that as a defense and get more lenient treatment because of it? I committed this felony because these felonies because I was depressed. I put my community at risk because any description you give, especially if it's vague, is going to lead to somebody getting arrested in a situation like this, or at least somebody getting hauled in for questioning, which these days is almost exactly the same as getting arrested. It just, how many guys would walk into court knowing they had done something that egregious and expect a judge to buy as a defense, I was depressed? I don't think very many. And yet you hear this all the time with women. All the time. Mm-hmm. Oh, I was depressed as an excuse. I have this mental illness that 90% of the time when people have it isn't disabling. It's just hard to live with. But yeah, I was depressed.
Well, depression's one of those. Depression's has that same property as gender dysphoria. It does exist in a small amount of people, but it's very easy to fake. It's very easy to just say, I have this thing, and no one can really prove you're wrong. So it's not as though she's stigmatizing depressives by saying, well, I just did this crime because I have this depression, because no one buys it. No one with a fucking brain in their head actually buys this depression story for a moment, except the courts, obviously.
And even in the case,
we've gotten to the point where we don't differentiate between sad and depressed. Like, all right, you broke up with your boyfriend dumped you. Yes, you're sad, and yes, you're demoralized for a while, and that's a temporary type of depression, but it's not chemical depression. It's not clinical depression. It's not. Grieving can be considered to be a temporary form of depression. You're depressed when you're grieving, and you recover slowly, sometimes never completely, but it's not the same thing as having something wrong with your brain that makes you constantly demoralized and constantly demotivated and constantly sad or constantly tired and things like that. Very different situation. And we not differentiating between those two things is a massive part of the problem with dealing with people considering themselves worthy of some sort of a pass for their behavior because they're depressed.
And even in the case of those people that do have depression, or they're living with that on a daily basis, and it's not sadness, you know what the majority of those people don't do? Lie to the police about being raped. Because usually when you have depression, you're very hyper aware of how cruel acts can affect people, because you're more sensitive to those things than the majority of, as people like to call them, neurotypicals. And they don't go about doing these egregious crimes. I can't think of, like, what this woman did is about as low as you can get. I can't think of very many other instances or potentialities where, like, it could be worse than lying to the cops, making a joke out of the issue of depression, lying about being raped. What else did she do?
Well, I mean, she could potentially have gotten like 3 black guys thrown in jail for nothing. Because I mean, they didn't, as far from what I can tell, they never found the people that she, claimed raped her. But if there was 3 black guys around and she conveniently happened to, know they were there and was put on the spot where she had to point the finger at someone, or if the cops went around and just started like picking up, groups of 3 black guys that fit the description in the area or something, she could have gotten them prison time potentially, or at least incredibly convenienced 3 innocent men, because she could not, essentially because she started a path where she had to follow through on this lie, right? And this has happened before. There have been stories that we've done on this show of women who have accused men of rape or sexual assault, and it snowballs from something small that they tell what they believe is a small lie so that they can avoid embarrassment, or about something, or something extremely petty, and then it snowballs into something major. And there are guys who get expelled from college, they get put in jail, they get they even get off innocent, but the whole neighborhood believes that they're guilty, so it doesn't change anything. It can be incredibly damaging to tell a lie like this.
And it's something that you see more and more in this age of social media. With what this woman did, I think she can make a legitimate plea of insanity in the court. I'm being facetious, by the way, but it's just like what she did was so insane. Like, I think, like, even if she entered that plea, there's more credibility to that than just saying, "Oh, I'm depressed."
Yeah, that's a bullshit excuse.
I'm trying to imagine the equivalent of. This is something that happens occasionally. People get fantasies of victimhood in their head, and they go and act out those fantasies for attention. And I was trying to think of what the opposite of acting out fantasies of being a victimizer would be like. And then I remembered American Psycho. That not to spoil anything, but it's all in his head. He's just he's imagining him being a victimizer and a murderous, brutal one, and he's just sort of tries to express it on the world, and no one believes him. Whereas women like this just have this fantasy story where they are the kitten that's being eaten by the ATM, and people believe them. And
yeah, unfortunately, that does happen too often, that they are believed. This is like, stories like this just hammer home the fact that we cannot have a believe the accuser standard in any criminal allegation circumstance. That we have to be evidence-based, because what if they had rounded up somebody and she had not backed off upon realizing that this was going to wreck somebody's life, but instead went forward with the allegations? Because that has happened too, and we've done news stories on that as well. I mean, that's what happened. To a degree, that's what happened with Brian Banks, but he was named. He wasn't just a random that they picked up. But his accuser knew from the beginning that she was lying, and she had a frivolous reason for it as well. And it wasn't even for something as humanly understandable as revenge. Like, people get pissed off and do the stupidest shit for revenge, but it was more petty than that. And this is like that. If she had not stopped, and somebody had gone to jail, or somebody in their community had gotten the shit kicked out of them, or anything like that, they could lose their job, their family might turn on them. All kinds of things happen when you're accused of rape. This could have had a terrible outcome, and those outcomes are vital to avoid, just the same as it's vital to avoid the outcome of having a violent crime committed against a person. And that's why you learn to defend yourself, and why you learn to live wisely.
Mm-hmm. And the worst part is that she was able to make a plea deal, so she was able to avoid being labeled a felon. All she has to do is follow her probation. So she got away with this pretty much unscathed. When this is why I think there should be a way to legally deal with people who lie about being raped. Because you could get someone in trouble. I mean, it wouldn't even necessarily have to be by the hands of the police. Like I was talking about before, there are people who will go and commit mob vigilante justice in the name of a woman's honor if they suspect that the system isn't going to work and they don't know all the information. They will act on just the emotional feeling of, this woman has been raped, we have to do something, and the system's not helping. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that she was caught or that the story came out that she lied, this could have easily been a feminist article talking about how it's a part of rape culture because they don't believe her,
Personally, I'd be totally okay with them putting a scarlet letter on her for the rest of her life, because I think that's perfectly moral. As far as legal, I don't think that would work, but just
like
me personally.
L for liar or something.
Yeah,
it's the one thing that would help would be if women who make accusations of intimate partner and sexual violence were not somehow immune to prosecution most of the time for things like she's been prosecuted for here. She's been prosecuted for the crimes that she committed. She lied to a police officer. She filed a false charge, false complaint. If she had gone to court and falsely testified against somebody, she should be prosecuted for perjury. And the severity of the sentence should be, associated with the severity of the sentence that or the consequences of the lie. Because it's not always a sentence, but that's unfortunately not the case. Most of the time, they don't get prosecuted. Most of the time, they walk away unscathed. And this is what I've seen in terms of domestic violence cases in multiple cases. And it still blows my mind how many of those I've seen where the woman files a false complaint. She files for a frivolous restraining order. She goes into court and lies in support of making that frivolous restraining order permanent, and in support of that complaint. I've seen women come into court with manufactured evidence that was obviously fake, like a tape that was supposed to be a tape, answering machine tape from a crank call, and the voice on the tape was a different voice with a different accent, a different tone, timbre, and cadence, and everything from the accused, and like not get prosecuted, not even get castigated by the judge or the prosecutor for lying. Just goes on to the next false accusation. And that's not going to stop until we start hitting everybody that comes in and lies like this with charges.
Yeah. I mean, at the very least, because you're wasting taxpayer dollars and, the time of the police and the judge and the courts and all that. Go ahead, Matt.
It just needs to be firmly established with everyone, women included, that the legal system is not your personal playground.
What is the argument? Like, I totally agree with you, Hannah. The consequences of lying should be parallel to the consequences of those who actually committed the act. What is the argument against that? Because I have yet to hear one.
Feminists claim that if we hold liars in the legal system accountable for the potential consequences or the real consequences of their lies, that will somehow discourage actual victims from coming forward.
Oh, come on.
The fact is, as long as, well, the feminists probably have this fear because of their own attacks on due process. If the listen and believe standard was applied to she's lying, then that could happen. But the listen and believe standard shouldn't be applied to anything, and you should only see prosecution in cases where it's provable that the individual knowingly and willfully lied, that they didn't just make a mistake, that they didn't just name the wrong person because in the dark it looked like somebody else, or because they didn't know who did this to them, and everybody's like, well, I saw so and so go into the room while you were passed out, things like that. But no, as long as we hold all criminal prosecution to high standards for evidence, and to that standard where it's not just listen and believe, it's investigate and confirm or deny, confirm or disprove, and then prosecute if you can confirm, then there is no danger that prosecuting liars would keep true victims from coming forward. The thing that keeps true victims from coming forward is that feminists are constantly telling them that they're not going to get any help.
Yep.
See, that's why I love you, Hannah. You're able to lay this out so much more succinctly than I ever could. Yes, that's exactly why you need to have parallel sentences for liars, especially because if that's the policy that you pursue in the future, you can actually, despite what the feminists say, you can actually encourage more women to come forward, because if you punish liars with equivalent sentences, that way it discourages more liars from coming forward and abusing the system and making a joke out of actual rape victims that want to see justice for the crimes that they've suffered. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
Yeah, that's another side effect. It does kind of make things rough. It casts doubt to a degree, but in all honesty, with normal standards for evidence, with high standards for evidence, even bringing forth evidence would counteract that anyway.
Right.
So at the end of the day, rape to come, I know that no one was actually arrested over this and convicted, but at the end of the day, making a claim that you have been raped is extremely serious, especially considering that, you know, it's a difficult crime to prove either way. So it often comes down to a combination of trying to stick to the evidence, and then there's a layer of public opinion that goes on top of that. It's just something that should never be taken lightly when someone makes a claim. And we just have to get away from this. We have to hold people accountable when they lie, basically, about this stuff. And we have to look at what they're lying for, and that, you know, they should be punished for that, so that they realize that this is, as to Hannah's point, you know, the courts and the police and all those, they're not tools for you to use to avoid embarrassment or to avoid shame. You know, it's time to clean your room and take responsibility. So, we're gonna move on to the next story then. There are no thoughts on this. I'm gonna give this one to Mr. Max. Hold on just a moment. I'm just getting the things ready.
Mm-hmm.
All right, go ahead, my man. Take it away.
All right, so check this out, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking about a story that comes out of Paris. Yes, Paris, France, not Paris, California. I believe there's a Paris in California, if I'm not mistaken. But yes, before I begin, I just want to ask all... Well, actually, before I tell the story, I just want to reiterate what Brian said at the very beginning of the stream. Hey, there are roughly 300 people watching this stream across Honey Badger Radio and the Badger live streams. I want to let you guys know, you know, I'm what I'm about to ask, hit that like button, yada, yada, yada. You have no idea how much hitting that like button helped us last week with our last stream. Collectively, between this channel and the live streams channel, we had roughly 10,000 views, which doesn't sound that impressive considering a lot of the views that we get on our main channel get upwards of that. But when it's a live stream, getting that many, as many as we got, it's actually quite impressive. And that all has to do with you guys participating, hitting that like button, and telling the YouTube algorithm that our content is worth watching. So if we can get it up to 150 this time, maybe 125 at least, that'd be really appreciated. Okay. So
wait, sorry, Max. One other thing before I give it to you. I should read through the super chats, otherwise they'll pile up, and
Sure.
we'll also lose context. So Field of Bears gives us $2 and says, "What if Aaron Fees had a gun?" And Redicus gives us $2 and says, "What if I want to stick more than my toe in?" When these are out of context, they just sound funny to me. But I feel like I shouldn't avoid.
That's a good question in any situation.
It is. I mean, I often want to stick more than my toe in.
Unless you're talking about shoes, it's a very controversial situation.
It is.
Wait, what are you sticking your toe in?
The mashed potatoes. Okay, so Joey Jojo gives us $5 and says, "I would like to apologize for the misogynist things I have said about women and female sexuality here. They were made in anger. I am trying to change." And Blave Kaiser, I'm assuming it was supposed to be Brave, because I remember we talked about this before, gave us $5 and says, FYI, in the USA, a young boy was beaten by a grown man about a lie, and in India, a man was dragged out of prison and killed. This is about vigilante justice. And then on the other channel, we got 2 more super chats. Zeranx gives us $5 and says, why wasn't she implicated in a hate crime when she invoked being raped by 3 black men in ski masks, no less? Well, real quick to answer that question, the therapist, for the woman, according to the therapist testimony, there was basically not enough evidence to show that she is necessarily racist. The therapist says she's not. Maybe she just said that because it makes the story more interesting. I don't really know. So, but I think that's a good question, anyways. And then,
yeah, it's those.
Go ahead, Max. Go ahead, Max.
Yeah, it's those specific details that make a false story more believable.
Yeah, it could be that. But I mean, I see your point. French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, cough, maybe that's why they need 2 female witnesses in Islam when 1 male witness is not available. Cough.
Oh, come on.
Actually, that is a recognition of gynocentric attitudes. Under Sharia law, the standards for evidence are very different. For instance, they don't accept DNA evidence, and actually they need 4 witnesses. But if I understand it right, and I may be getting this wrong, so don't quote me on this, those witnesses don't all have to have seen the crime. They can be character witnesses that can say the woman never lies. But the consequence of getting convicted under Sharia law of the crime of rape is execution. It's not jail time.
Huh.
So it's a heavier consequence. Then it is a situation in which in some ways women are more protected, and in other ways, because they're more protected, they end up less protected by their word not being counted the same as a man. I don't know if other areas of law only need 2 witnesses, but if a woman accuses somebody of rape under Sharia law, she needs 4.
And I've often wondered how difficult it is to get 2 witnesses, or indeed 4 witnesses, or whatever it is. When you have the concept of taqiyya, you're allowed to lie if it's in pursuit of Allah's cause. So if you know in your heart that this woman is blessed by Allah and would never do anything wrong, then it's okay for you to bear witness to a rape that you didn't bear witness to, especially if she was raped by an infidel.
Mm-hmm.
There is that.
Wait. Taqiyya? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's mentioned not in the Quran but in the Hadith. That Muhammad at some point, I think I've mentioned this once before, that he said to a couple of noblemen, say to this man what you will, as if to imply, yeah, you can lie to him as long as it serves me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, there's got to be some way that my corrupted Simpsons can exploit that for the good of the Simpsons ethno state.
It's bizarre. You normally you can't have a religion in which things like lying and murder are okay, because that religion tends to die out because murder kills people and lying destroys language.
Yeah.
And yet, right there, you got a religion in which it's kind of okay to lie as long as you're saying it to infidels.
In other words, in group, out group.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have a significantly different treatment between the in group and the out group, and that is where that ends up being justified. Everything that you're not allowed to do to the in group because it's morally wrong, the out group's not considered equally human, and therefore it's not morally wrong to do bad things to them.
Just put it on the floor, please. Yeah, thanks.
So, like, basically, it's the same thing as considering anybody who's not part of your in-group to be as low as animals that you would hunt or animals that you would farm for meat.
Yeah. Okay, Max, so I've read the super chats. Now I'll give it back to you. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay,
Put it
dude.
on the floor.
Sorry, did you hear me talking?
No,
yeah,
it's good
okay.
advice in any situation. You should put it on the floor. Go ahead and put it on the floor, man.
Drop it like it's hot.
And then dip your toe in it.
For fuck's sake, I thought I muted myself. Okay, well.
It's okay.
I enjoy that, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so back to our Paris story. Before I begin, I just want to quote John Lovitz in that one episode of The Simpsons. Déshabillez votre chemise. Okay, just figure that out for yourselves. All right, so X-Dolls. It's a business based out of Paris's 14th arrondissement. I believe, arrondissement in French means section or area of a city, and I believe there are 20 in total in Paris. Though X-Dolls is officially registered as a game center, it is actually a brothel for silicone sex dolls. Recently, politicians and advocacy groups petitioned the Paris City Council to have the business shut down for various reasons. Here's one particular quote from the head of the communist group in the council.
What?
A guy named, who would have thought? Nicolas Bonnet-Oualge. That's actually how it's pronounced. Quote, this establishment is the latest invention to bring brothels back into the landscape. X-Dolls purveys a degrading image of women. As well, there's another woman, but yep.
I'm just shocked. The communist commentary. It's like they want to seize the means of reproduction.
You can't reproduce with sex dolls yet. Okay, moving on. One day, for both Joey, Jojo, and I, it shall be with a Kat Dennings sex doll. All right. Here's another quote from a woman named Lorraine Questio, who is a member of a feminist group called the Mouvement du Nid, which in French means the nest movement. Here's a quote. X-Dolls, is not a sex shop. It's a place that makes money from simulating the rape of a woman. They can't consent, okay? This isn't like Blade Runner 2049. Okay,
that's the problem, Max. That's the problem. They should make sex dolls where you have to it's like a password. You have to get consent before you can bone them. Apparently,
they don't have experiences because they don't have a mind. There's no, it doesn't experience anything. Therefore, it cannot be raped.
That's the thing. There's no intelligence there. They're not independent beings. Now, if you could prove that they actually were thinking and that there is a unique sense of life to them, like we attribute to humans, then there's a moral issue there. But we're not there yet. That's like 50 plus years away. Anyways,
I was waiting for them to do this episode in Star Trek: The Next Generation, but they never did.
Yeah.
The episode where someone rapes Data, and they're like, "Well, it's an android. You can't rape an android."
It's called Pornhub.com, Mike. She said it was important to... I'm kidding. She said it was important...
They don't just analyze the experience anyway.
Yeah, that's true. She said it was important...
This isn't like it was when it happened with Spot.
Most illogical. She said it was important to shut it down, given that 86,000 women are raped in France every year. The Paris City Council, although rejected a motion that called for the closure of X-Dolls, the police concluded no laws were being broken. Brothels have apparently been illegal in Paris since 2016. Those who wanted it shut down wanted it to be classified as such. In respect to the police, here's a quote from a Paris police officer who went to investigate the area. This is not a case of prostitution. They are not real women. This is not a criminal, but a moral problem. Exactly like what Hannah and Mike and I just said. And finally, bookings, in case you want to go to Paris for this, bookings for X-Dolls are made online. The exact address is kept secret. You can pay €80 an hour to spend some time with a woman named, a doll named Kim, Lily, Sophia, or Candace.
If it identifies as a woman, then surely it's a woman.
Okay, and then finally, both dolls, in case you're worried about germs, both dolls and rooms are cleaned and disinfected before and after every use. And with that information in mind, we now have a candidate for worst job in the world, which is cleaning out these rooms after people are done with them. Brian?
Oh, God. Well, I mean, it's crazy because, like, who wants these things closed down? Why are you calling it a brothel? There are no real women here. These are just, I mean, it's already kind of sad as it is that even these things have to exist. Can't we just leave these people alone with their sex dolls? Also, why are they so freaky looking? Now, you guys notice that the sex dolls just look weird? They look weird to me. They like, especially these kind of like are kind of like a kind of an awful brand. Let me go back to it so you guys can see what I'm talking about. They're just kind of weird looking. But
I think we're at the inevitable point of the uncanny valley where Moore's law sort of takes us. We've for the last 100 years, the idea of fucking a robot just meant sticking your dick in a metal box, and in 100 years, maybe they'll have perfected it. But there's going to be a lot of that ugly niche in the uncanny valley for a few years.
This is why I take issue with the cops even calling this a moral problem, because what they're basically saying is society has the authority or is entitled to decide issues of men's masturbation, because this is essentially masturbation. You're going into a facility that provides an inanimate object with which you can masturbate. And it simply happens to have an appearance that facilitates masturbation a little more than something that is entirely inanimate looking.
Yeah.
So it's humanoid looking. It looks like a woman, sort of, mostly. It does hit the uncanny valley. That picture is.
It's weird. Isn't it?
Almost all dolls hit the uncanny valley with me.
They do.
I can deal with Barbies because they're 11 inches tall, and I used to have those and everything, and make little clothes for them and stuff. But other dolls, almost all dolls, I just avoid them. So
some people get freaked out by puppets as well.
Yeah, puppets don't bother me.
I take the hit.
Puppets don't bother me, but dolls look too human and lifelike a lot of times, and it does. But in any case, no, this idea that it's a moral issue, what the things men are allowed to masturbate with may look like, that is societal ownership of male sexuality right there. Nobody has complained and said society has a right to decide what the things that women masturbate with can look like. And there's always been inanimate sex dolls. These are more realistic, but there's always been inanimate sex dolls. There's those anime pillows. There's, what else is there? There's the plastic blow-up dolls have been made for both sexes, I think. South Park did the joke about the Antonio Banderas doll and everything. Nobody has ever come out and said when women do that, they're simulating rape. It's only when people think men are getting off in response to the image of a woman.
Yep.
That all of a sudden it's simulating rape. This is society, in particular parts of society that identify more with feminism, defining men having sexual release at all as a trespass against women, even if there is no woman involved. And this is partly, I think, where the original objection to homosexuality came along too, because gay men don't rely on women at all for their sexual release. They don't even rely on thinking about women for their sexual release. God forbid, they're never going to support a woman, and so on. Their sexuality cannot be owned by society. And that just, these two things strike me as very similar responses. That it's treating a man whose ability to achieve sexual release is not owned and controlled by society as a threat, even when there's no woman involved, or in fact, in this case, and just like with gay men, because no woman is involved, and therefore no woman has control of it.
I think it's ironic. I don't know is it ironic? Oh, I'll figure it out later. But we all know that getting a man to achieve orgasm is much simpler than getting a woman to achieve orgasm. Well, mechanically speaking, for a man, it's sort of, you can get away with up and down, just get this fluid out of my system, and you can have it done fairly quickly. But with women, reaching orgasm is a very complicated process. You got to do lots of clockwises and anti-clockwises and ups and downs, and all sorts of things. But here
A is for Alfred, B's is for bats.
but here is where the the stereotype sort of gets switched. Because despite how complicated a woman's orgasm is, all she needs in order to get it is a vibrating piece of rubber. Whereas men, despite all they need is up and down, get this fluid out of my system, because it's a vascular erection as opposed to a muscular erection, it has a psychological element. And evidently, it's a psychological element easily as complicated as the mechanical element of women's orgasms. Evidently, men can't achieve orgasm unless they have a woman, either in a picture or in their mind if they've got a very good imagination, or if they don't have a very good imagination, they need something as close as possible to a woman, like before they can actually achieve something they're satisfied with. And the way the world dealt with the female orgasm, it happened about 100 years ago. They started developing these steam-powered machines that sort of go in and out, and it was seen as very perverse at the time. It's like, why would this is absurd? Why would any woman need this just to get an orgasm? This is this is degenerate in some way. But we got around it, we got through it, and now we sort of understand the nuances of women's sexuality. And this is us trying to get our heads around the psychological nuances of men's sexuality. And another irony, so the nuances of women's sexuality is mechanical, and the nuances of men's sexuality is psychological. Again, that's something of a stereotype switcher. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is society, dare I say, society, getting its head around men's sexual nuances. Like they don't need those careful clockwise movements on the old clitoris there. They just need a human being. They really, really need a human being. Do you get me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just two things. One, what Mike was talking about there, it just reminded me of this great YouTube video. In case you guys haven't seen it, look up Batman Can't Stop Thinking About Sex. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen.
Oh, I know the one. Yeah.
Okay, two. The fact that this thing was classified as a game center rather than a brothel, it just brought something to mind. With the advent of video games in our culture over the last 30 years, a lot of people, including feminists, have tried to attribute violence to their proliferation. Except if you actually look at statistics, violence has been going down with the increase of video games as an industry. I personally have the belief that with stuff like this, with a sex doll brothel, if anything, I would imagine that rapes would actually go down, because in that respect, potential rapists could take it out on an inanimate object that can't think or feel for itself, right? Mm-hmm. It's like with video games, like the reason why there's less violence with the advent of video games is because people have that release. This is just a theory. I can't back this up, but
Yeah, I mean, potentially. The idea that feminist group would say that this is, promoting rape culture and objectification, degradation of women is laughable. I mean, it really is. So I think that if anything, it's going to be better. Although, to Mike's point, it was something I was thinking about. There's definitely something interesting about the fact that women tend to be just fine with vibrators and dildos, but men need something more. They seem to need a visual component, something either tactile, real, or visual. I mean, that's probably why prostitution is the oldest
psychological
profession,
component.
right?
It's something that simulates the psychological component of a mating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Also,
I want to point out a thing in relation to the rape accusation that these folks are making about this brothel, and why it's really either stupid or projection. Feminists have maintained for, I think, close to 60 or 70 years now that rape is not about sex, right? That it's a crime
power.
of dominance and power. That the rapist isn't committing the crime in order to get off without having to get consent. That the rapist is committing the crime in order to get off by inflicting the experience on the person being raped. So if that's the case, you cannot simulate rape at this type of brothel. This is not a situation that would be satisfying to somebody. That the rapist of feminist imagining would never be satisfied with something like this. He'd never be satisfied with anything but a real person who was going to be hurt by the act of being raped. Okay, so this idea that this is a rape training or rape simulator is bullshit, unless feminists admit that that is a segment of the small population that actually commits rape, and not the entirety of the population, and that there are cases in which people commit rape. Both sexes do this because they do not accept other people's boundaries, or because they do not have the moral compunction to basically not take what they want through violence, and what they want actually is sex. And that might be satisfying enough to keep that segment of the small population that commits rape from acting on real people. But even then, I'm not sure, because sex does depend on the truly satisfying sex does depend on a biological partner, a person that you have some emotional investment or attraction to. And it's not quite the same as masturbation. If you do nothing but masturbate all your life, there's no companionship in it. It's not gonna be the same. And I like this idea that there is any link at all between rape of living, experiencing, having human beings and sex dolls is ludicrous. It's the idea that the connection is there is just absolutely ludicrous. It would be like saying women are simulating raping a man every time they use a dildo shaped like a dick.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So we got some super chats, and then I guess we'll move on to the next story. Oh, one other thing too. Do you guys notice that in the room where the sex dolls are at, there's a little no smoking sign right there? So blow a load in a doll, but no smoking afterwards.
But what if I smoke after sex?
You should probably get that checked
flammable?
out. Yeah,
I think that's actually a no sword fighting sign.
There you go. No glow in the dark condoms.
All right. So super chats. Sean Leeper gave us $2 and says Paris, Oklahoma, in reference to which Paris we're talking about. It's quite possible. And let me see here. So, right. French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, to be fair, the 2 female witnesses for 1 man in this case is only for financial and business transactions, not for other situations. This is in reference to the Islam thing from before. Joey Jojo gives us $5 and says, I wouldn't mind a sex doll, but after actually having contact with an actual woman recently, I don't really think plastic can compare with a woman. Well, you would be right about that. Cyberzerk gives us 50 secs and says, hashtag Je suis contacula. I'm not really sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but hey, I'm the guy reading the super chat, so too bad. Okay, my French is not very good. Nope, it's not. I'm talking about myself. Joey Jojo gives us $2 more and says, okay, I will buy a Kat Denning sex doll, LOL. John Woodruff gives us $5 and says, it's not that men want sex dolls, it's that we don't want her. Right. And Xeranx gives us $2 and says, 2 words regarding dolls. Altered Carbon. I think Altered Carbon is like a show or something, isn't it? I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
But thank you guys so much for the very generous super chats. Now we will move on to the next story. So, Emma Gonzalez, a student at Parkland, Florida High School, where 17 people were left dead after a mass shooting, you might have heard a little bit about it, has been making the rounds on CNN and other media outlets, calling out Trump and the NRA. The following is a short segment of a video uploaded by CNN. So I'm going to play a little bit of this video for you guys, and those of you should be able to hear this. This was at a recent rally. I didn't really pay attention to the rally, but I heard about this.
Talking about how we should have not ostracized him.
I'll go back a little bit.
Those talking about how we should have not ostracized him. You didn't know this kid. Okay, we did. We know that they're claiming that there are mental health issues, and I am not a psychologist, but we need to pay attention to the fact that this isn't just a mental health issue. He wouldn't have harmed that many students with a knife!
All right, stopping it there. So the shooter, Nicholas Cruz, had been described as a lost, lonely, and violent long before he went on his rampage. He was diagnosed with depression, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, emotional behavioral disability, and autism. Cruz had been assigned to a school for students with emotional issues by grade 8, was on medications, and had counselors in school and at home. Cruz's early life included some traumatizing events. He was the only other person present in the room to his adopted father's fatal heart attack at age 5. He was adopted as a baby along with his brother Zachary some years later, who now regrets having bullied Nicholas as much as he had. Zachary may have resented his brother for being favored, with friends of the family adding that Nicholas was a mama's boy, that the single mother doted on him. The socially awkward Nicholas was bullied in school. Despite warnings, 23 calls to the police over 10 years, inappropriate conversations with his peers about guns and killing, a peer counselor telling a deputy that Cruz might have tried to kill himself by ingesting gasoline and he wanted to buy a gun, being reported to the state for cutting his arms on Snapchat. It all began to go completely off the rails. In January 2017, he stopped undergoing mental health treatment, and after his mother moved them to a condo, he assaulted someone in the building and was kicked out. By the end of 2017, the FBI had been alerted to comments he made on YouTube about becoming a professional school shooter, and his mother died of pneumonia. She was she was 68. Sorry. Shortly after living at a former neighbor's house, he was kicked out, and the Sneeds family in Parkland took him in. The Sneeds said he wanted a girlfriend so bad, and that they thought he was lonely. He told them he was skipping school the day of the shooting. So I know that this is an old story, and that this has been talked about in the media for some time now. But there was a very interesting thing about what this girl said. And I think that it's something that we could at least examine. I wouldn't try to explain away all of the stuff involved with this extremely tragic incident, nor take responsibility away from Nick Cruz, the guy who committed this terrible act. However, when Emma Gonzalez says that, she makes the claim that there were those who were basically wondering who was bullying this kid. Who was it that was, why was he treated so poorly in school? And then she says you didn't know him. And in many ways, it leads many to suspect that she could have been among the people who bullied this kid in school, or at least ostracized and avoided him. Now, I'm not saying that, because she's a teenager, right? I'm not saying necessarily that this is something that she should answer for, but because that would be kind of ridiculous. But I do think that there is something there. There's something about, aside from the fact that there were so many systems in place that failed this kid that as he was growing up. I don't think that these gun control activist types coming from the school, being used by the media, their hands are not completely clean here. And that's my suspicion. So I know this is a difficult thing to talk about, but I want to throw it out there. And I guess if anybody wants to add anything, Go ahead.
One of the difficult things to deal with in terms of an individual that is that dysfunctional, and I mean that's all pretty, what's been described is pretty dysfunctional, is the fact that schools treat not responding to someone's interest in your friendship by becoming friends with them now as bullying. So here you have a situation where this individual, this Cruz might have been an individual that was seen by his peers as being dangerous. He might have been seen by it sounds like he was seen by his peers as being toxic and the kind of person that you don't want necessarily in your life. And people have the right to disassociate with other people.
I mean, he could have been born this way, potentially. He could have been born this way because his life has so much tragedy in it that
I don't buy the born bad argument that people make either. Like that's I consider that to be kind of bullshit. Everybody has their potential in life, may have a spectrum. But your spectrum is affected by your life circumstances. It's not just nobody's destined to become a bad person or a good person. You have the opportunity to be your best or worst potential self, and your attitudes, your circumstances, and so on, disadvantages and advantages, they all impact that. But the thing is, it's a really it's a hard thing to turn around and say this person was this bad, basically, all around, but it was bullying for them to stay away from him. Now, if they heckled him, if they beat on him, if they said nasty things and spread rumors and lied about him and did all of the things that girls do in terms of relational aggression that boys have started doing because they're not allowed to duke it out when they have a conflict anymore, that's different. If they were doing all of those things instead of talking to the adults or simply avoiding the guy and telling him, no, I don't accept this behavior and I'm not going to have you involved in my life, then yes, then they were bullying. But to simply turn around and say, this person who is already violent, this person who is already in his own right bullying others, is not somebody I'm going to be around, and I reject association with this person. That's not bullying. It's not bullying to turn your back on somebody who is mean to you or who has made themselves dangerous to you. I had to do that, and I was bullied in school. I had people in my life who posed a danger to me, who got me involved with dangerous people by lying to me about who they were initially. I had people in my life whose behavioral disorders made them a danger because they did stupid things, and the fallout from the consequences would hit everyone around them. That I cut out of my life not because I was mean to them, but because you have the right to protect yourself from the consequences of other people's behavior. And it's not bullying to protect yourself from the consequences of other people's behavior. No, but the way this girl talks has me wondering if they were out overtly cruel to this guy rather than simply defensive against those potential consequences.
That's the thing that, like, again, take this with a grain of salt, because the sources I get, they're all, the websites are all very much like kind of, pro-gun, right-wing sources, so they could be just looking for reading between the lines a bit, because the only source I have is the clip of her saying what I just played for you guys, where she says, you don't know him. But there is some, it doesn't seem too much of a stretch that there was some relational aggression, or like to what you were saying, or at the very least, this kid was someone that people just were intimidated by, or they just thought he was really strange, and they just alienated him and excluded him from everything. And maybe that was because they were there were people saying that he seemed really, really lonely, and it could have been of his own doing. And a lot of times I think that in my experience with bullies, they have their own pain that they're dealing with, and it's just the way that they're going about it. is it's like all they know is abuse, so that's how they act out in the world. So it's tough. I mean, I don't want to just label that, say that this girl created this situation, but I think it's that there's a good chance if you've lived in high school, you know how cruel kids can be. It's not that it's not that unreasonable to think that that's possible, right? So
you're right, Brian. For me personally, because of how complicated this whole situation is, I personally would want to recuse myself until something like that can be proven. But for now, I'll just sort of echo what Hannah said by adding a little bit of an extra layer of legitimacy, because what you just mentioned, Brian, what you just mentioned, Brian, was the fact that this guy was autistic. And I didn't know that. I am too.
Yeah.
And one thing that I want to bring up in respect to the whole, well, you guys should have done a better job trying to entertain his company and not treat him as weird. Well, as somebody who has these problems, I don't buy that. I think that when you're that young and you encounter somebody that is abnormal and you don't know how to handle that, you don't know how to approach that, you want to try and be kind and try to be peaceful and loving to everybody, but sometimes you just come across somebody and you don't know how to interact with them in a way that allows you to get along with them, to make sure that there's no unintentional offense.
Sure.
And in that respect, I had that type of situation happen to me in high school, where people would avoid me for that reason because of my neurologically wired social ineptitude. And I don't blame people for that. Now, like I said, if something comes out later that shows that some of these kids were actively bullying him, that's another story. And we'll talk about that when and if that type of detail does come out. But for now, I just wanted to echo what Hannah said.
No, I agree with that 100%. Again, I said going in, this is like, it's not 100% confirmed. It has been making the rounds, so that I'm sure that some people that are watching this have come across these articles. So it's probably good that we are examining it. So we're not reporting the news. We're commenting on the news, and we try to if it doesn't come up, if it doesn't seem like it's 100% confirmed, I will do my best to say, look, this is not 100% confirmed. This is what people are saying. So I'm leaving it open. In addition to that, if these diagnoses are correct, that he didn't just have autism, but he also had emotional behavioral disability, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and depression. And he was on several different psychotropic medications. So what happened to him could be the product of any number of other disorders. Because I know, people on the spectrum, and they're nothing like this. But I also knew people who had depression and bipolar disorder and stuff, and they were much more self-destructive and generally destructive. So it could have come from something else. And I think that them being on medication for stuff, which might even be something that they're not actually suffering from, but rather it's just easy to put somebody on pills, especially young men, which happens often in school. I mean, I remember we did an episode on that with Sage Gerard, who, is a totally cool dude, but he's been on so many different medications that it's like he doesn't know what part of who he is actually real and what part of it is the medicines. And we do this with boys a lot. We label them with a disorder and we put them on pills. So could that also be a factor? I don't know. Again, I'm not claiming to be an expert, but I think that there's just so many factors. But he was definitely bullied in school. We just don't know by whom. And he didn't have a father in the home. He didn't have a biological father. And then shortly after he was adopted, his adoptive father passed away. So he didn't have a dad either. Didn't even have a replacement dad. So there's so many factors here that we have to look at.
It's a literal recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it's almost the more that comes out about this story, it's like I always say about the damage that the welfare system has done in conjunction with the other social circumstances in the United States and the legal circumstances. If somebody decided that by design they were gonna push a person to the point where they broke and did something reprehensible, they couldn't have come up with a more perfect formula. Now, that said, none of the things in this guy's life individually are excuses for what he did.
No.
None of the things in this guy's life, you can't, like, I know people that have experienced all of the various things, not all in one person, but individuals who, as a group, could be said to have experienced all of the various things. I mean, I was a walking pharmacy for a while, and it started with I had to have a medication for my asthma that turned out to be, well, there's been lawsuits because of that medication, actually. There's actually been a class action lawsuit that I didn't participate in because if I hadn't taken that medication, I would have died. We tried other medications and they didn't work. So I don't feel entitled to be angry that there were side effects because it saved my life. But I understand that there were people who took that medication that had worse things happen to them than me. But I started out with this one steroid, and then they put me on another steroid and another steroid, and eventually I was on enough steroids and decongestants and antihistamines and everything that the combined side effects, including my response to decongestants, which is weird, made me nuts. And then instead of looking into those medications' effect on me, they put me on selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors and then lithium, and then started looking into other medications. And it wasn't until I didn't need the steroids anymore, and the steroids started, it took like 10 years for me to get the steroids out of my system. And over the course of that 10 years, the psychological medicine started making me sick because I didn't need them. And all of that combined, at no point in time would I have, because the other circumstances in my life were nothing like this guy's circumstances, at no point in time would I have engaged in the type of aggression that he did. But I did have aggression in response to the steroids. And with the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, the phenomenon I noticed was you have dysfunctional impulses, intrusive thoughts, things that you would normally have some anxiety toward the consequences of acting on them. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors actually dampen the anxiety over those consequences, and you're not as worried that if I do this, there's going to be a bad result and I'm going to suffer, or people around me are going to suffer. And that I think is why they are so frequently associated with violent outbursts and self-harm, not because they trigger it, but because they take away something that is normal to the mind, that is a hindrance to acting on it.
Oh,
you know, so
Anna,
so those things are there already, and now the thing inside you that would have stopped you from engaging in that behavior has just had a damper pedal put on it.
Hannah, you're so right. Like, even for me, I used to be on a medication called Vyvanse. Worst thing that ever happened to me in my life, because one element of having autism is that you're a lot more sensitive to different impulses that your body takes in. Like your five senses are a lot more sensitive than that of neurotypicals. Taking Vyvanse for me apparently was akin to taking cocaine.
No,
and
geez.
Yeah, when I started taking it and I started developing a tolerance to it, it was bad enough. But then when I realized I had to come off of it, coming off of that high is the worst feeling I've ever experienced. It's like your skin is thinning and your insides are trying to jump out of your body. It's the most horrifying thing. And when you're in that state,
holy shit,
you are a completely different person. Yeah, I'm absolutely surprised that I didn't put my fist through a wall because I was almost there. I could have done something really stupid. But yeah, you get the point.
Yeah, that's actually, you mentioning putting your fist through the wall. The medication that I was on for 20 years, my brother got pneumonia in high school, and he developed like a lung condition where he had asthma-like symptoms anytime he got a chest cold after that, or anytime he got a little bit sick. When he had pneumonia, they put him on that medication. It was a lower dose even than I had. So he was only on it for, I think, maybe 6 weeks. And he went from being the kind of person who was patient enough to deal with me all the time on that steroid to putting his fist through the wall over a circumstance that would have made him laugh ordinarily. For being on that medication for 6 weeks. I was on that for 20 years.
Fuck.
Jesus Christ.
Now you guys know why I say I have an anger management problem.
Yeah. Well,
I did. There's some ways in which medication can permanently change your mind, and there are tools you can learn in certain types of therapies to overcome the handicaps that are caused by that damage.
Mm-hmm. Well. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So yeah, it looks like there's likely a lot of other stuff at play. Mike, were you going to say something?
Yeah, he's got all these conditions. We've spent most of our time talking about these rare conditions that he has, and fair enough. That's often a factor, sort of in these things like ADHD and autism are, conditions that leave people misunderstood by the general public. But this guy has another condition we haven't mentioned. It's kind of close to home regarding what we do. A condition that also makes him misunderstood by the general public. He's male. Mm-hmm. I saw in the thumbnail of this podcast, we've got the question, who bullied him? And that got me, it got me thinking. We're assuming it could only be students who bullied him. Perhaps his family. But what if is there anything else that might be bullied? Someone or something else that might. Is there such a thing as institutional, even systemic bullying? And it's sort of funny that girls get bullied too in school. Girls, if they're on the wrong side of the in group, they get ostracized and demeaned to the point of suicide. But girls don't shoot up the school as a result. Anything like as often as boys do. Why? On the surface, it looks like good old toxic masculinity, but it doesn't really jibe with the idea of bullying. Are boys doing this because they're toxic, or are they doing it because they're bullied? Well, if we really unpack what we mean by bullying, it's abuse, isn't it? Bullying is just a kid word for abuse. And if boys are shooting up schools and girls are not, then maybe boys are being abused by someone or something that is not bullying girls. I mean, do schools bully people? Do schools and universities abuse their students based on their gender? Do they?
Yes.
Do they devalue them and manipulate them into serving those who are valued? Is that a thing that happens? If so, maybe that's a thing that should stop happening.
For starters, I would think that, telling someone all of his life that he has a degree to which he is automatically toxic because of his gender, and telling him that the other gender should be put first in every circumstance, that he's a bully if he engages in aggression against the other gender, but the other gender is justified if they engage in aggression against him, and so on. It sounds like bullying to me. All of the things that we tell boys when they are growing up that differentiates between their status in society and girls' status in society I've talked about this before in terms of feminists complaining about emotional labor and asking, imagine the emotional labor that it takes to parse at the age of, 3, 4, 5 years old, when at that age, your entire psyche is wrapped up in your own welfare. And it's starting to extend to getting wrapped up in the welfare of the people that you love and trust and value the most. And your love and trust and value of those people is in part wrapped up in your own welfare. And then you get told, but you're second to this person because this person has different genitals than you do. You know, they may not, obviously they don't mention the genitals, but it's obvious that there's differences at that age between boys and girls. And having your whole life having to parse, you are in these ways a second-class citizen, to use a feminist term. I cannot imagine that should be labeled anything but being bullied. You know, and it's not so much an indictment of women and girls as wrong or bad or toxic themselves in any way, as it is an indictment of the idea that we should put boys last and girls first all the time. Society has changed. Even if that was ever functional before, it isn't now. Mm-hmm. And I could see that it would be a contributing factor. You tell somebody that they're toxic all the time. You tell somebody that they're dangerous all the time. You tell somebody that everything they do can be deemed wrong just because somebody of the opposite sex doesn't like it all the time. You're going to produce somebody who has a tendency to, at some point, say, fuck it, I don't care. I'm just going to do what's wrong then. Fine.
Yeah, if there's any attitude in my life that fucked me up more than anything else, pushed me towards suicidal tendencies, it's that type of gynocentrism, where you're trying to repress those elements of your being, and you just get to a point where you think you're such a monster. You're just like, F it, maybe I am a monster. Thankfully, I never crossed that point, but yeah, you're right, Hannah.
And let us not forget a couple of facts around this whole thing. One, he had been described as lost, lonely, and violent long before this whole thing happened. Two, we know that he lost important parts of his family, which likely set him on a path where he was basically just coming in with a disadvantage. It's like a handicap. He was on a lot of medications, and according to his family, the Sneeds, they said he wanted a girlfriend so bad. And so this was another thing that he was looking for. He was looking for a connection, it seems. This, again, this is not me saying it's okay what he did. This is me looking at what are the things that we know about him. And then when it comes to Emma Gonzalez, which is the bald woman that you see in the picture here, we do know that she knows him because she said you didn't know him as though she did. So we know that there is a connection between them. Is it possible that she could have been a part of his ostracism and bullying and stuff? I don't know that for sure, but we do know that she knew him. And we do know that it's like something that she wanted us to know, that she knew him in a way that other people outside of that school's community, anybody outside of that couldn't know it. So there's definitely something there. What you guys think in the comments, go ahead and put it down there. Tell us what you think. Do you think that she could have bullied him? And what would be your what would make your case for it? If not, I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on that too. I'm always interested in seeing everybody's thoughts on these stories. And I think that, this is a big one because right now everyone's talking about gun control stuff, and this is like, or they're talking about mental illness stuff. And I get that those are conversations that we can have, but I think we're missing the larger point. And just like this always happens when these mass shootings occur, we always forget to look at what I think are probably really important details about the individual. Elliot Rogers is another really great example of what I'm talking about. So let me do some super chats, and then we'll go ahead and do the short stories. Joey Jojo gives us $5 and says, Cruz's life sounds almost exactly like mine, beat by beat. I could have done what he did, and that scares me. I'm glad I'm getting help now. Well, I'm glad that you're also getting help now, and that's a good thing to I mean, it sounds extreme, but if that's what you think, then no, I'm glad that you're getting help, because we wouldn't want. That's why we're here, I think. All right, so moving on to the next story, something a little lighter. Argentine man legally changes his gender so he can retire early. Sergio Lazarovich, an Argentinian tax official, has exploited a loophole in the law to legally change his gender from male to female in order to get an extra 5 years of retirement.
Oh, did they really say his? I was listening for the pronouns there, and they finally dropped one. You're going to jail, sunshine.
The 59-year-old divorcee changed his name from Sergio to Sergia, which is all that is required under Argentinian law to claim a legal change of gender. Argentinian females are allowed to retire at age 60, while males must wait until age 65. Women are also allowed to work until age 65 to receive a higher pension upon retiring. According to Matias Arsenato, who heads the Salta province civil registry, quote, "This is a clear case of misuse of retirement rights and of the law on gender identity."
How dare you?
How dare you, sir? He identifies as a woman. He identifies as a person who is retiring 5 years earlier. Bigot. You better respect his pronouns and his money. While Lazarovich claims that she went through the transition for personal reasons, an anonymous relative has come forward to say that this may not be the truth. Quote, "Throughout his life, he had many relationships, all with women. At no time did he feel attracted to men, and even made many comments throughout his life against gays and transsexuals." Not every trans person is straight.
And maybe he has internalized homophobia. You don't know that.
Well, there's another thing. At least historically, some closeted individuals have been the most anti-gay individuals out there because that's the only way they could cover up, their sexuality. But this is hilarious because they're all outraged over him changing sex to get this benefit. But nobody's outraged over the fact that men have to work 5 years longer in order to retire, and
why
women
does the
are allowed to
benefit
retire
exist in
early
the first place?
and start half the population gets to retire early and collect these benefits based on what? What is the reason? What is the modern reason why women should be allowed to retire early like that?
And these bitches have the audacity to complain about a fucking wage gap.
Yeah, and now he's victim of the wage gap, I think. Yeah. He can claim to be anyway. She. Clearly
Sorry,
a woman. Sorry,
I'm guessing that when women retire 5 years earlier than men under the system, they probably get 5 years less worth of earnings added to their retirement, and therefore they have that much less of a payment, however much that difference ends up being. But the fact is that they're still able to collect 5 years earlier. And I'm wondering if the death gap, the lifespan gap, basically is the same or similar in Argentina as it is in other countries where women generally outlive men. So if it's a gap of a couple of years, then it might be 7 or 8 years more collected retirement by these women. Versus men collecting for a lower number of years, not just because they started later, but because they're going to stop sooner.
There you go. Yeah, for sure. You get to retire earlier and you get to live longer.
Yeah, and nobody's outraged over the fact that this benefit is unique to women.
And they've even extended it. They've even extended that benefit to men who think they're women. But not men who are lying about being women. Mm-mm. And we definitely know where the line is, guys.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Okay.
So all the Argentinian men, there's strength in numbers. Start identifying
as women so you can retire early. Yeah, go ahead.
Dude, I know where I'm going in the year 2050.
Take advantage of that ridiculous law. All right, so moving on. The same anonymous relative reveals that Lazarovich's motives might be more complex. His conviction is that it is unfair because he is a man. He has to work 5 years more than a woman. So he's making a point by doing this too. While speaking to an Argentinian newspaper, Lazarevich was recently quoted saying, quote, "This would not have been an issue for anyone if everybody retired at 65.
See, this guy just wants equality. Feminist, what the hell, man? You should be supporting this. Sorry, woman, my bad.
Yes, come on, Max, get it right. Lazarevich has yet to apply for early retirement. I just think it's fucking hilarious. This guy is based as fuck, as far as I'm concerned. That's
guy's a fucking hero.
He's the man. You guys, he is the hero that Argentina deserves right now. So, please show support. So I just had to share that.
Argentina.
Yeah.
Don't F for me, Argentina.
All right, so I'm just looking at the comments. People are loving it. I think I got a super chat here, so let me go ahead and read it out. French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, "That's what you get for nationalizing retirement schemes." Yes. All right.
Yeah, like our pyramid scam here in the United States, also known as social security system.
Yeah. Last story of the day is Viking. So okay, we was Vi Queens. An article in the Independent revealed that according to Swedish scientists, the cadaver of a Viking warrior long presumed to be male is in fact likely a female. To quash doubts about the gender of the body, DNA samples were taken from the skeleton's arm and tooth. The sample revealed a lack of Y chromosomes, confirming the gender of the Viking. She was buried with several weapons, 2 horses, and gaming pieces, which was the reason the body was assumed to be male. When the analysis came out revealing that she was female, some suggested the objects buried with her belonged to somebody else. A researcher wrote in response to those claims, quote, "This type of reasoning takes away the agency of the buried female. As long as the sex is male, the weaponry in the grave not only belong to the interred, but it also reflects his status as a warrior, whereas a female sex has raised doubts." Other researchers have written, "These findings provide a new understanding of the Viking society, the social constructions and norms in the Viking age." And another writes, "Our results that the high-status grave BJ581 on Burka," I think it's pronounced Burka or something, "was the burial of a high-ranking female Viking warrior, suggests that women indeed were able to be full members of male-dominated spheres."
How do they know they were male-dominated?
Oh, well,
there's a lot of stuff we don't fucking know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and is this actually an incidence of them finding a dead female gamer who said she was gaming equipment, and the mainstream media, the inclusive feminist-led mainstream media that doesn't think that girls can't be gamers is questioning her nerd cred and her warrior cred.
She was the first fake gamer girl. That's why.
Yeah, she's the first fake gamer girl. You know, and they accuse guys in nerd culture of being the ones who do this, and yet who has done it? Mainstream media.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hello, and the researchers are the ones that had to correct it. Oh, geez.
Yeah, I thought this was a fun story. Also, some reports say that she was buried with a map because she knew that her husband never asked for directions, so that she wanted to make sure they got to Valhalla. But,
see, the reason that men don't ask for directions is because they actually know how to read a map.
Okay, let's just go on the quick assumption that, okay, maybe this woman was female. So what? Back in the day, like, let's say she was a warrior and that she was able to stand alongside men in the course of battle. So what? That was like 1,000 years ago. Everybody, in the type of lifestyle that a Viking had, I would imagine that everybody would have to be prepared for battle somewhat. And I would imagine that they would want to train some women, maybe the bulkier ones, the ones that you know, like the Brienne of Tarths of the world, to be able to fight. And that would be totally fine. It's not a matter of social construction. It's a matter of necessity. And even in that circumstance, I would imagine that when it comes to a culture like that of the Vikings, where they're braving terrible wilderness and fighting off predators, even then they would try to be conscious of the fact that, hey, what people can we send out to, like, what specific numbers of people can we send out to tackle these tribulations? I would imagine, depending on the threat level and the amount of people available, that most of the time it would be the men, because their diet is salted pork. Sorry, I'm just having this image of Gimli in my head.
Salted pork.
Salted pork.
Salted pork.
Just eating meat all day and the stereotypical image of a Viking. They would want to send those guys out to deal with the bigger problems. Yada yada yada. It's not a matter of social constructionism. Stop trying to put your politics in there. It's just whatever. I don't care.
Mm-hmm. Well, all this shows me. Okay, so one of the things that is worth pointing out is that the majority of the Viking bones that were dug up, that were buried with weapons and armor and shields and horses, 'cause she was buried with 2 horses and everything. They were all male up until this point. So it would seem that this is, so far anyway, an example of a female Viking warrior, if true. And I don't see much of a reason to doubt that that's the case. I mean, I'm guessing that throughout history, we have likely given women the work that men do, provided they were able to do it. So she was probably able to do it. Or maybe she, inherited the position, like she was the wife or daughter of some great warrior, and she basically just took his job. Maybe he didn't have any sons. I don't know. So there could be a number of reasons, but it does kind of fly in the face of the whole women have always been oppressed throughout history thing, because you're seeing an example here where there'd be no reason for them to for Vikings to necessarily exclude women, but here is a woman that did fight alongside. And yes, it's definitely a woman, because they looked at the DNA and there were no Y chromosomes to be found in the skeleton, aside from the fact that the skeleton was smaller and it had the hips were wider. It looked like it was likely a female even before they went into the whole chromosomal analysis. So there you go. Viking bitches. It was a real thing. Viking Hannah Wen, Luga Hanshu writes.
just never piss one off.
Yeah. She's got the length of hair that she can do the braids, so she could do it. Field of Bears gives us $2 and says shield wall. Just shield wall. And
from 300? Yeah, that was badass.
Yeah. And then French Honey Badger gives us $5 and says, didn't Sargon talk about Viking this story years ago? Well, I think that this is a recent update where they actually analyzed the bones. So,
this story might have been this story might have been a continuation from a past story, or it's possible this is a second find.
Or they found something else. Well, I originally found this story on like a feminist website, but I thought I would go a little bit less biased, and so I tried to find alternate sources, and the best one seemed to be The Independent. So, it's the best we could do.
Yeah, Sargon did talk about the story a while back. And even then in that video, I think I remember him saying, there's tons of other reasons why this woman is a woman. And even if she was a warrior, that still doesn't disprove the claims that people like us here at Honey Badger Radio, make about the biological differences between men and women.
There you go.
Well, the biological differences exist, but there's also the fact that throughout history, women have always had to be tougher than women have to be today. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Women have had to work. Women have had to defend their homes. Women have had to defend their communities. Women have had to be ready to deal with harsh circumstances in nature. Women have had to be ready to deal with conflict. This is not exactly a huge shock that there would be women in Viking culture that were warriors. There are even in the 20th century, in wars in the 20th century, Western culture encountered other cultures where women were sent into war, and where women were sent to attack soldiers from various Western countries. So this is not a shocker. It's simply that we've gotten to the point in our lack of understanding of history due to the political narrative that it's just been accepted that women weren't allowed to do anything before feminists came along and won them the right to do everything that women do today. It's not true. Women were able to choose not to do those things, and they were better able to choose it than we are now. I wouldn't have been able to choose to be a housewife now because of the circumstances that feminists fought for. My family faced financial situations that it meant that I have always had to work, and it doesn't bother me so much in terms of that's the way society is today, but it does bother me that it happened because another woman got a pass on taking accountability for her actions. Mm-hmm. That's where we are today. The idea that feminism had to win women the right to go to work, the idea that feminism had to win women the right to be tough, the idea that feminism had to win women the right to be considered warriors like this, it's bullshit. Yep. Women have been coddled, yes, but women have always had the ability to reject that coddling if they so chose. It's just that most women didn't.
Yep. Well said. And again, yeah, it's evidence that feminism wasn't necessary because here we are. It's funny because they'll tout this and they'll say, look, girls can do it. And it's like, no, all I'm learning from this is that they didn't need feminism because they didn't. I'm sure they didn't have feminism back when Vikings were in their longboats, raiding and pillaging. So, sorry, guys. You just proved how irrelevant you are. All right, so I got, let me see. I think there's one more super chat, and then we can roll out. Yeah, there's a couple more. The Great Indoors 1979 gave us €2 and says, is the female Viking picture color corrected? I don't know. I think it's from a TV show or something. Clearly not.
It's from the TV show Vikings, actually.
It's an original photo of a Viking colorized. No. Yeah, I think it's from the Viking TV show. That's what I figured. And
when you see pictures of women, when you see pictures of women from 100 years ago, even that far back, they're already a lot more square-jawed and manly than they look today.
Yeah,
we've been sort of hyper-accelerating the neoteny of, well, ironically, accelerating the neoteny of women, at least in the public eye. So
part of it is
a thousand years ago, when Vikings were around, women were pretty fucking butch, and they didn't. The woman in question probably didn't look like that. She probably wasn't.
No.
She might have been a woman passing for a man.
She probably looked something like Rosie O'Donnell or Laurie Penny or something.
She might have been a woman avenging the death of a man.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of things. She might have been a woman who defending her estate. She might have been a widow. She might have been a woman who never got married. There's a million different things. But I think the thing about pictures from 100 years ago, that one of the things that makes women look more masculine is when they work hard, they build muscle. Women build muscle. We don't build muscle quite the same as men do, but you do build up your neck. You even build up your jaw. You clench your jaw to deal with difficult situations. You're going to build up the muscles on the sides of your jaw. And a lot of the reason why a lot of women in older pictures look more manly is because they did more manual labor.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody does laundry today the way women did laundry 100 years ago. Guaranteed. Not in Western countries. Nobody would put up with that.
No. All right. And then we got one more super chat from Field O'Bears for $10. He says, the shield wall was a tactic that was employed by many cultures, including the Vikings, and one member of the wall weighing significantly less would be quite a problem when employing that tactic. Well, to Mike's point, she might have been really butch. So, or she might not have been part of the shield wall. She could have been. They were saying she could have been a tactician, hence the game set. So, but it is all. It's kind of speculative. So I mean, none of this is for certain. And I know people in the comments were saying that, and you're right. It may not be absolutely true. The Great Indoors gives us €2. This is the last super chat I'm going to read. Says 6,000 years ago, women looked like a man's rib. I get it. I would have thought more like Rosie O'Donnell, but we'll go with the man's rib. So,
well, Rosie O'Donnell's disgusting. I mean, both inside and out.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get out of here, guys. So I want to say thanks for joining us on the HBR News of the Week. I want to thank.
I wonder how bad she smells on the inside.
What?
The Star Wars joke came
Yes.
to mind. I wonder if Trump's ever like sought shelter inside a frozen.
Of Rosie O'Donnell. And
Sorry, couldn't resist. Carry on.
I thought they smelled bad on the outside. All right, so I want to thank Mike, Max, and Hannah for joining us, and I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Please, if you haven't already, hit that like button. Also, hit the notification bell so that you are told when these go live. I saw someone pop in mid-show, and they said I was just notified. So I don't know if you hit the bell or not, but please do. I don't know what the deal is at YouTube is, but there's some fishy shit going on because sometimes people just don't get told when our shows go live. So hit the notification bell, hit the like button, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, share the video with people if you want like to get the message out. These are important conversations. This is stuff that I strongly believe in, and I think that more of us should be talking about it. Maybe somebody even more qualified than I am.
One quick thing. Just wanted to say we reached our goal of 150 likes for this stream. So thank you so much, guys.
Woohoo! All right. And yeah, so I guess that is it for me. I'm going to be going into the after show to talk about this article. I'm a slut and I'm 100% proud of it. So stop shaming me already.
That's the name of the article, right?
It's the name of the article. Yes. Features a photo of a girl in Daisy Dukes that is not the author of this book, of the article, rather. It is not the author. So if you see that girl and you're saying, wow, she's cute, that's not the person who wrote the article. That's just a photo that the person wanted to use. All right, so anyway, if you want to join us on the after show, please become a patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. One level of donations let you watch the show. Another level above that lets you join us in the Discord to talk about the show. So please consider that if you are able. And with that, this concludes another episode of HBR News. We'll talk to you guys next time.